What's something you saw as a kid but didn't realize was messed up until you were older? My dad called them treasure hunts. Every couple months, usually after a big fight with mom, he'd wake me up at 2 a.m. Let's go on an adventure, buddy. I was 6 the first time it happened. We'd drive his beat-up Chevy to these storage units off Highway 16, the kind with the orange doors and the buzzing fluorescent lights. Dad always stopped at the 7-Eleven first. Red Bull for him, blue Slurpee for me, even though mom never let me have sugar that late. Our secret, right, champ? I'd wait in the car playing Snake on his Nokia while he'd disappear into one of the units. Through the foggy windows, I'd see the flashlight beam bouncing around inside. Sometimes he'd be gone 5 minutes, sometimes 30. I'd fall asleep with my face pressed against the cold window. He always came back with these black garbage bags, sometimes small ones, sometimes so big he'd struggle to fit them in the trunk. On the nights he brought tools, box cutters, pliers, screwdrivers, he'd come back with smaller packages wrapped in newspaper. The weird part was how different he seemed afterward. Before going in, he'd be all twitchy, checking his phone, chewing his lip raw, but coming back, he'd be whistling Metallica songs, ruffling my hair, stopping for ice cream at the 24-hour Denny's even though it was freezing outside. Why can't we tell mom about our guy time? I asked once when I was 7. Because mom's worried too much. Plus, this is just for us men, he'd say, tapping my chest with his finger. I felt so grown up. When I was 8, one night after waiting forever, I got bored and followed him. The unit door was cracked open. Inside, I saw Dad hunched over what looked like car seats from fancy vehicles. BMW logos, Mercedes symbols. He was slicing open the leather with a box cutter, digging into the foam and pulling out these flat vacuum-sealed packages. His hands moved so fast like he'd done this 1,000 times. He spotted me and froze. Get back to the car, now. It was the only time I ever heard that tone from him. I ran back and pretended to be asleep when he returned. The next morning at breakfast, the local news showed the exact storage place we'd visited. Local drug bust uncovers high-end stolen vehicle operation. They showed police carrying out car parts. Mom turned up the volume while Dad suddenly remembered urgent yard work. Life went on. The treasure hunts got less frequent but didn't stop. I never told anyone, not even when my DIRE officer came to school talking about reporting suspicious activity. It wasn't until my sophomore year when Dad got arrested that everything clicked. 8 years of late-night adventures suddenly made sense. The garbage bags, the tools, his random cash despite never having a steady job, those whispered phone calls that ended when I entered the room. During my first visit to county lockup, I finally asked him, "Those treasure hunts, you were cutting drugs out of stolen car seats, weren't you?" He stared at his hands for so long I thought he hadn't heard me. Then, "I always made sure you stayed in the car, safe, but you brought me to crime scenes, Dad. You made me your lookout." "No," he said, voice cracking. "You were never the lookout. You were the reason I couldn't get caught. Having you in that car meant I'd never do anything crazy enough to risk not coming back to you." He reached for my hand across the table. "Your mom left because she couldn't handle my lifestyle. I kept you because I thought having you would force me to quit. It didn't, but it kept me careful. What keeps me up at night isn't that my father was a criminal. It's that in his twisted way, taking me along was how he made sure he wouldn't go too far. And now I'm terrified because sometimes I catch myself thinking that makes sense."